I like Halo. Like, I really like Halo. I also like making games, so I thought it'd be fun to try and recreate it, but in 2D because I can't 3D model to save my life. To get started, I made a basic top-down character controller, which should have been easy, but because I'm stupid I forgot to raise the speed above 0, so every time I tested the character it wouldn't move, which I thought meant that there was a bug, but no, I'm just dumb. Right now, the player is made up of 2 scripts, those being Entity and Player. Entity carries properties and functions for basic interactions, and stats like health, while the player handles the controls and implementation of these functions. Next up was a basic weapon system. These have a bunch of parameters for things like fire rate, damage, burst, ammo, and you get the idea. They also have 3 main functions: shooting, which spawns a projectile with the relevant properties at the muzzle, reloading, which will replenish the magazine, and point, which will aim the weapon at the designated target. What's important to note is that these functions are distinct from the player script, so they can be used by other entities. After adding some basic art and placeholder UI, I started up on enemies. This one here is using the player script still, which looks really funny. Anyway, that brings up the enemy script, which replaces the player script as a way of controlling the entity, but instead of using controls, it uses custom behavior. The basics is that they'll sit idly until the player, or any potential target, enters the sightline, and then they'll move towards and rotate towards this target and fire their weapon when the target is in range. And just a little tangent, but do you see those arms? I'm not going to get into it, but they were such a pain to make and will continue to cause problems later on. With that aside, now that you can die, we need a way to restart. Now, when the player's health drops to 0, the level will reset and the player's position and weapons will be set to what they were when the last checkpoint was triggered. Speaking of checkpoints, these are just invisible hitboxes that save the aforementioned stats when you enter them. Arguably the most important element of Halo is switching and swapping weapons, so I added a feature where using the scroll wheel will swap your current and secondary weapons, and weapon pickups which will swap out its held weapon with yours when you interact with it. On top of these changes, I also added the assault rifle to accompany the battle rifle, just so it's easier to test weapon switching. In order to better test movement, I added some basic level tiles so there's an actual background to orient yourself around. They aren't great, but I'll update them later to look better. Editor's note, they did not, in fact, get updated later. Now that things are starting to take shape, it's time to add a little polish so that the kinks can get ironed out before they balloon as the project grows. Among these are recharging shields, tighter movement, bug fixes for the arms, unique arms for the elite, and weapon pickups giving you ammo if you have the same weapon already. Going along with the theme of polish, it's time to make actual UI. There are basic bars for shield and health, a crosshair, along with a new font that I spent way too much time looking for. And coolest of all is the little weapon indicators. These are small icons which will show your main weapon and your secondary. Finally, I added some new art for the main menu and added a pause menu. Now that the gameplay foundation is there, it was time to add new weapons. First up is the Magnum, a slow-firing precision weapon. I accidentally put it too close at first, which looked pretty funny. After that, there's the plasma pistol, which fires single plasma shots in quick succession. I didn't add the overcharge feature of this weapon because it wouldn't work well with the current weapon system. Then there's the plasma rifle, which is basically an automatic plasma pistol. The Covenant Carbine is a plasma precision weapon, and the shotgun is a close-range power weapon that fires in a spread. Obviously, there's a lot more weapons that I could have added, but this feels like a good variety for this short prototype. I also implemented health packs, which work very similar to weapon pickups, but they restore health instead of swapping out your weapon. Adding weapons was relatively stable and painless, so let's look at some bugs. This elite just started shooting from its feet for some reason. Here we also have my favorite, which I call triple wielding. If you pick up 2 weapons at once, you'll hold a third in addition to your primary and secondary, and you can switch to it. I'm honestly amazed that this works, and it's kinda sad that I have to patch it. After fixing these admittedly hilarious bugs, I updated the hit effects to indicate better when shields or health are hit, as well as when shields are broken or recharging. Now there's a good amount of feedback, but to really sell this I have to add sounds. I usually don't like sound design, but using this program called SFXR, I was able to quickly whip up some retro style sound effects pretty quickly. Along with some screen shake, shooting now has a lot more impact and weight behind it. Now that we have a solid foundation, it's time to add enemy variety to freshen up gameplay. Of the new enemy types, we have grunts, sniper jackals, elite majors, and shield jackals. All of these enemies operate pretty similarly to the standard elite, but with different stats and weapons, except for the shield jackals. These enemies have an entity made of pure shield in front of them, so you either have to destroy the shield or attack them from an angle to avoid it. Another side note is that when I tried making the art for the jackals, I accidentally made this horrifying homunculus. Now that we have all the sandbox elements and mechanics, it's time to put together a level. This was pretty straightforward and there's not much to talk about, except for the editor crashing because of a stupid bug with the arms that I mentioned earlier. After that, it was just a matter of building it out and playtesting. Finally, I made a retro rendition of the classic Halo theme, which is by no means great, but I think it works well enough for the main menu. Here it is. And with that, the game is done for now. It definitely still has a lot of issues and could definitely do with more content, so I'll most likely come back to this project adding weapons, levels, and maybe even mechanics like grenades or vehicles. If you want to play for yourself, there's a link in the description. Without any further ado, here's the game.